How can I help my client address a lawsuit over an unlicensed image I provided?
It is becoming more and more common for copyright owners to use software technology to see who is using their images and even video and sound online. And so it's become more and more risky. And the copyright law says doesn't matter what your intent is. The only question under copyright law is, did the image get used without permission? So let's say, for example, just hypothetically, because there are some people out there who might use an image, and let's say you get it off of a website that says it's free to use. So you believe it's free to use. You use it, and now the author or the owner of that copyright comes after you and says, hey, pay money or I'm going to sue you for copyright infringement. The law doesn't care if you think you did everything right, because intent is not an element in copyright infringement. The only question is, was the artwork used without permission? So that's why it is really important for all business owners to keep track of any intellectual property that you're using and keep the license from that. And for example, I will only buy images for our website from a big name company like Adobe Stock Images.
And the nice thing is, too, when you work with a reputable company like that, usually they have
A provision, an insurance policy that says if you get sued, we'll back you up, we'll indemnify you there. What we have is a situation where you copied it without permission and your customer used it without permission. So that technically is copyright infringement. And although the damages to the owner might be insignificant, they could go after statutory damages, which is essentially a minimum. Now, practically speaking, it's probably not worth spending tens of thousands of dollars to go after your customer or you by the owner of the copyright filing a copyright infringement case in federal court. It's probably not worth them spending the money on legal fees. But if they do, now you either have to spend the money on legal fees to defend yourself or your customer. And by the way, if your customer ends up going to court and then discovery reveals you provided that image, you'll probably be added as a co-defendant. Now you're both on the hook. And now your customer is stuck paying their attorney's fees plus any damages that are awarded by the court. So in this scenario, it's most likely best to negotiate some sort of settlement where the copyright owner will waive the claim in exchange for some amount of money. And usually they'll do that because they don't want to spend all the attorney's fees trying to win in court. And then even once they win, they just get a piece of paper that says they're owed the money. It's called a judgment. They now still have to collect on it by going after bank accounts or whatever, which can be a very expensive process. So practically speaking, it usually makes sense to have a copyright infringement dispute like this settled. And usually they settle for a few $1,000s. If they initially offered 12,000, I would think there's some room for negotiation there. I would push back, and it probably makes sense to have an attorney. The goal of the attorney is to negotiate a settlement. And so usually when I approach these cases, I start out by asking the other side to suspend all litigation deadlines while we try to work something out in good faith. So that way we take some of the pressure off. And then the idea is the attorney will try to negotiate a deal by arguing your client doesn't have a whole lot of money, it's going to be difficult to pay, it was an accident, they've removed the image right away from their website. And by the way, sometimes the other side will just go away if the image is just removed because they realize, you know what, it's not even worth pursuing. I've had situations with my clients where I've advised them, take the image down, ignore the cease and desist letter, and see if it goes away. Now, the fact that it's still in a letter and not a lawsuit is great. So because it's in the correspondence phase, sometimes just taking down the image will be enough to have the other side go away. but it depends on who your client is. If your client kind of looks like they have money, then it's unlikely they're just going to go away. But if it's just a little company and it's like the copyright holder might look at this and go, it's not worth spending money on attorney's fees and suing this out. I'd recommend the attorney be asked, focus on negotiating a settlement for efficient as possible. And I would probably look for an attorney at under $500 an hour if you can find one, because if you're spending $1,000 or $1,500 an hour on an attorney, you can quickly blow through a lot of money in attorney's fees.